The sky hung heavy with gray clouds as I stood by the graves of my parents, the only sounds the distant rumbling of thunder and the soft patter of rain on the freshly turned earth. The ceremony had been brief, a quiet farewell to the two people who had shaped my life. Now, only the echo of the minister's words lingered, fading into the background as I stared at the twin gravestones before me. I felt Emily's small hand slip into mine, and I squeezed it gently, drawing comfort from her presence. Mark stood beside me, his face a mask of indifference. He had never been close to my parents. They were kind to him, but there had always been an undercurrent of tension, a clash of values that neither side cared to address openly. Still, I had expected more from him today. Some show of support, a comforting word. Instead, he had been distant, his mind seemingly elsewhere. I tried to focus on the graves, to remember the good times, but the knot of anxiety in my chest refused to loosen. After the last of the mourners had offered their condolences and drifted away, we made our way back to the house. It was an old sprawling Victorian, with gabled roofs and ivy-covered walls, a house that had been in my family for generations. As a child, I had run through its halls, played in its secret corners, and listened to the stories my parents would tell about the people who had lived there before us. Every room held a memory. Every creak in the floorboards was familiar, comforting. As we entered the front door, the house seemed to sigh around us, as if it too was mourning. I had thought that being back here, in the place where I had so many happy memories, would ease the ache in my heart. But instead, I felt a deep sense of unease, as if something was out of place, something I couldn't quite identify. Mark was the first to break the silence. He set down his coat and turned to me, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but with an edge I had never heard before. I nodded, though a pit formed in my stomach. "What about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He hesitated for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about the house." I frowned, not understanding. "What about it?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's too big for us, Sarah. It's old, and it needs a lot of work. I think we should consider selling it." The words hit me like a slap. "Sell the house?" I repeated, incredulous. "This is my parents' house, Mark. This is where I grew up. How can you even suggest that?" He didn't flinch. "I know it means a lot to you, but we have to be practical. The upkeep alone would be expensive, and we could use the money to buy something more suitable." The thought of selling the house, of letting go of the place where I had so many memories, was unbearable. "This isn't just a house, Mark. It's a part of my family's history. It's the only thing I have left of them." He gave me a look of pity that only deepened my anger. "You're being sentimental. We need to think about the future, not the past." Before I could respond, Emily, who had been sitting quietly on the old leather sofa, suddenly let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but of something darker, more malicious. "Mom, Dad's right," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This place is a dump. We should just sell it and move on." I turned to her, shock evident on my face. My own daughter, the one I had raised with so much love in this very house, was siding with her father against me. The betrayal stung deeper than I could have imagined. "Emily," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of hurt and disbelief, "this is where you grew up. Don't you care about that at all?" She rolled her eyes, a gesture that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. "I care about living in a nice house, not in this old, creepy place." Her words cut through me. I had always thought that Emily and I shared a special bond, one that couldn't be broken by time or distance. But now, she was standing there, dismissing everything that I held dear as if it were nothing. Mark stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Look, Sarah, I know this is hard for you, but we need to be realistic. The house is mine too now, and I think selling it is the best decision for all of us." The truth of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Legally, he was right. We were married, and everything I inherited was as much his as it was mine, but I had never imagined that the man I married, the man I had trusted with my life, would turn on me like this. "I won't let you do this," I said, trying to sound firm, though my voice wavered. But Mark just smiled, a cold, calculating smile that sent a chill down my spine. "You don't really have a choice, do you?" The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pressing in, making it hard to breathe. The house that had been my sanctuary, my refuge, was now feeling like a prison. The memories of my parents, the love that had filled this home, were slipping away, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling of loss. Over the next few weeks, Mark began the process of selling the house. He contacted real estate agents, had appraisers come by, and even started packing up my parents' belongings. I tried to fight him at every turn, but my protests were met with indifference. Emily, once my sweet, loving daughter, had become a stranger, her loyalty now with her father. She refused to even discuss the matter with me, brushing off my attempts to talk with her. I would often find myself wandering through the empty rooms, running my hands along the walls, touching the furniture, trying to hold on to the memories that were slipping through my fingers. The house had once been filled with laughter, with the warmth of my parents' love, but now it was cold, silent, and empty. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, the house dark and quiet around me, I found myself thinking about my parents. They had loved this house, had poured their hearts into it, making it a home filled with warmth and happiness. They had wanted me to have it, to carry on the family legacy. But now, that legacy was being torn apart, piece by piece. I knew that Mark had never really cared about the house, but I had never expected him to be so callous, so indifferent to my feelings. And Emily. I couldn't understand how my own daughter, who had grown up here, who had shared so many happy moments with me in this house, could be so eager to see it sold. As the weeks passed, the house was put on the market, and soon enough, there were offers. Mark was pleased, almost smug, as if he had won some great victory. Emily was excited about the prospect of moving to a new house, one that was modern and sleek, with none of the creepy old vibes of our current home. But I felt like I was losing a part of myself, a part that I could never get back. The day the sale went through was one of the hardest days of my life. I was forced to pack up the last of my parents' belongings, each item a painful reminder of what I was losing. The house that had once been filled with love and laughter was now just an empty shell, a victim of greed and betrayal. On the day we moved out, I stood in the doorway one last time, taking in the sight of the home I had once cherished. The walls that had once echoed with my parents' voices were silent now, and the rooms that had been filled with warmth were cold and empty. Mark and Emily were already outside, ready to start their new life in a new house, a life that no longer included the warmth of my parents' legacy or the memories we had shared in this home. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the house, but for the life I had known. The house was gone, and with it, the last connection to my family. All that remained was the bitter taste of betrayal and the cold realization that the people I had loved most in the world had turned their backs on me when I needed them the most. In the months that followed, we moved into a new house, a modern, spacious place with all the amenities one could want. But it was just a house, a building with walls and a roof, devoid of the warmth and love that had filled my parents' home. Mark and Emily seemed happy, content with their new surroundings, but I felt like a stranger, disconnected from the life I was living. I tried to fill the emptiness with new routines, new hobbies, but nothing could replace the sense of belonging I had felt in my parents' house. The memories of that home haunted me, a constant reminder of what I had lost. As time passed, the distance between Mark and me grew. The man I had once loved, who had been my partner, my confidant, had become someone I no longer recognized. We spoke less and less, our conversations reduced to polite exchanges about mundane things. The bond that had once held us together had frayed, worn thin by the strain of what had happened. Emily, too, had changed. She had grown more distant, more independent, and our relationship, once so close, was now strained and awkward. I couldn't understand how she could be so indifferent, so uncaring about the home we had shared, the memories we had made there. It was as if she had erased that part of her life, replaced it with a new, shinier version that had no room for the past. I often found myself driving past the old house, unable to resist the pull of the memories it held. I would park across the street and sit there, staring at the windows, the ivy-covered walls, imagining that I could still hear my parents' voices, see them in the garden, tending to the flowers they loved so much. But the house was no longer mine. It belonged to someone else now, someone who would never know the history, the love that had once filled those walls. And as much as it pained me, I knew that I had to let go. That holding on to the past would only keep me trapped in a place I could never return to. In the end, I realized that the house, as much as it meant to me, was just a place. The real legacy of my parents was not in the walls or the floors, but in the love they had given me, the values they had instilled in me. And while the loss of the house would always be a wound that would never fully heal, I knew that I carried a piece of them with me, wherever I went. But the betrayal of Mark and Emily, the coldness with which they had dismissed my feelings, was something I couldn't easily forgive. It had changed something in me, hardened my heart in a way that I didn't like. I had always believed that family was everything, that the bonds of love and loyalty were unbreakable. But now, I wasn't so sure. As I stood on the threshold of our new home, I realized that the life I had known was over. The house was gone, the last connection to my past severed. All that remained was an uncertain future, a new beginning that I wasn't sure I wanted. But I had no choice. I had to move forward, to find a way to live in this new reality, to rebuild my life from the pieces that were left. It wouldn't be easy, and the scars would remain, but I knew that I had to try. For myself, if for no one else.